thinking about generations. Like, I love thinking about how one generation is different than the next generation. I like thinking about how even my generation is different from your generation. I could quote some lyrics to songs and you're going to have no clue that they even exist. I saw a video the other day of Dirk and Luka, two Mavericks, the All-Star game. Well, when Dirk entered the NBA, Luka wasn't born yet. And now Luka is 19 years old and Dirk is 40. And they were playing 90s songs, the All-Star game, and they had to guess who it was that wrote the song and sang the song. And they were all 90s songs. Well, Dirk was just nailing them, and Luka didn't get one of them. And it was just an interesting look at the difference between these two generations and how generations think about things so differently. And if you didn't know, you guys are really probably, so in this room we've got a lot of generations. We've got baby boomers. So if you're a baby boomer, raise your hand. Mom, that's you. Oh, great. Okay. Mom's a baby boomer. If you are a Gen Xer that is around my age, Gen Xers raise their hand, put your hand down. Kim, Rebecca, you're a Gen Xer. Jessica's a Gen Xer. I'm a Gen Xer. Then you have millennials. All right, millennials. Lacey's a millennial. Caleb's a millennial. Y'all are too young. Then you have Generation Y, and that's all you younger ones and dad. Y'all are all Generation Y. Yeah, y'all are the very top of Generation Y. Y'all are the bottom of Generation Y. And every generation is so different. And here's what cracks me up about generational views, is that if you didn't know it, every generation likes to criticize the generation that comes after it, right? So every generation likes to look at the younger generations and be like, well, back in my day, it wasn't like that and all this kind of stuff. Here's one of the things that millennials, listen to this, millennials and Gen Y, you get criticized by the older generations and they say things like this. And nobody even talks to one another anymore. All they do is look down at their phones. They don't even pay attention to one another. They're not talking to one another. It's all communication skills has disappeared. And this is going to be the downfall of the world. That's how they talk about you guys. I don't know if you know that or not. They may not say it to your face, but that is what they're thinking. Well, you know what? I have found that a lot of generations are hypocrites. And a lot of generations like to talk big about other generations. And come to find out, those generations are not really any different. It just may manifest a little bit differently. So I grabbed a picture for y'all. Put this picture up. That is a picture of a bunch of
that is great.
Older generation people that complain that all you guys do is look down at your phones, yet they get on a train on their way to work, and that's what happens in the morning. Okay? They're not looking at each other. I got another picture too, because this one's at the park. Look at all the conversation that's going on. Everybody just is either zoned out or they all have their papers out, because it's just hilarious to me that generations look at another generation. Here's another thing they say about your generation. Here's another thing they say. These younger millennials, and most older generations don't even know that millennials and Gen Y are two separate things. They just see all the young kids as millennials. So they're just like, oh, these millennials, these younger. They think that you guys have no focus or attention span. They think that you can't focus. Okay? They also think that you don't stay with things very long and you'll quit stuff really quick. So the older generation looks at you guys and says, these millennials, they just can't focus on anything. Their attention span's too short, and they just want to quit stuff all the time. If they can't win, they'll just quit. Let me tell you something. I have watched teenagers for 18 years play video games. And let me tell you something. Teenagers can focus. Have you ever walked in a room and seen a teenager playing a video game and how they are zoned into that video game? You could walk in, yell their name, try to get their attention. They don't know you exist. All right? You can walk in and be like, hey, Trafton, hey, Trafton, come downstairs. And Trafton will be like,
that's exactly.
It's going to be, he will not even recognize that you've entered in the room. You could paint your yourself completely green, walk upstairs and do jumping jacks and cartwheels and they will not, teenagers will not even acknowledge that you exist. Why? Because they are so focused on that video game that they don't even know that you're in the room. Here's another thing I've seen teenagers do when they play video games. They will be stuck on a level for 3 hours and they will not quit. They can be stuck on that level and die in the same place for 3 hours and they will not stop. They will keep going. Now, there'll be a lot of yelling and screaming going on. The game is cheating! But you will not quit. You are going to stay there and you are going to finish that video game. And so there are two things that I have to say to the older generation about you guys. You know how to focus and you know how to persevere. There's no doubt about it. You can focus and you can persevere. I see it when I watch you play video games. You can focus and persevere. That's not a problem. And what we're going to talk about tonight, the study that we're going to do, is we're going to see prophetic history that we've already touched on a little bit, just in more detail, that is given to Daniel in order to encourage him and the rest of Israel to maintain their focus on God and to persevere through whatever comes. To maintain their focus on God and to persevere no matter what comes. Don't tell me you guys can't focus and you guys persevere. I know better. I know better because I've seen you play video games. I play video games. All right? And I would get so frustrated with Super Mario Brothers, but I would not quit until I beat that game. The original Zelda, I beat it. On the original Nintendo, I know all about focusing as a 14-year-old kid. I am not going to read all of chapter 11. What I'm going to do tonight is I'm going to summarize the historical content in Daniel 11, because I do not want to overburden you with all of the history that you're just like, my brain, okay? I understand that. I love history like this, but I know that you may not. So I'm going to summarize a lot of this. I've given you a lot that you can write down in your notes. I've given you more than normal if you'll look, because I'm going to deal with this history thing. And so we're just going to start in verse 2. It says, "And now I will show you the truth. Behold, 3 more kings shall rise in Persia, and a 4th shall be richer than all of them. And he shall become strong through his riches." Now, remember, Israel has been in captivity for 70 years. What leader of Persia gave the declaration that Israel can, in waves, start going home? What was his name? Cyrus. Cyrus gave the decree that Israel can start going home. Okay? This vision, which is vision number 4, this vision that starts in chapter 10 and goes all the way through the end of the book, this vision right here is dealing with 4 other kings and rulers after Cyrus. Okay? So Persia is going to have 4 more rulers after Cyrus. Now, the 4th ruler, okay, you've heard this name before. The 4th ruler, the one that's mightier and greater and shall rule with great dominion and do as he will. Verse 2. Shall be far richer than any of the other ones and become strong through his riches. This is King Xerxes. Okay? Have you ever heard of the story of Esther? This is the king who is ruling Persia during the story of Esther. The story of Esther takes place in Persia. I know when you look at your Bible, you're like, well, Esther happens books way before. It's not in chronological order. Okay? Now, listen to me. Here's what happens. How many of you have ever seen the movie 300? Okay? The movie 300 is about this king, Xerxes. Because here's what happens. Look at it. Here's what's crazy. I told you this before. The reason why liberal scholars say Daniel has to be written after all this history is because it gets it too right. Look at what happens. Daniel chapter 11, after this King Xerxes becomes strong through his riches, look at what he does. He shall stir up all against the kingdom of Greece. That is exactly what Xerxes did. Xerxes gathered up his massive army and attacked Greece. Stop talking and listen. And attacked Greece. But he lost. He failed. And once he lost, Greece eventually comes into power. Okay? So the first is Persia. The second part is Greece. And he talks about Greece in verses 3 and 4. Listen to this. Then a mighty king shall arise. This is a Greek king. A mighty king shall arise who shall rule with a great dominion and do as he wills. Who is that? We've already talked about Alexander the Great. This is Alexander the Great. So Persia falls. Xerxes is done. The end of the line of Persia. The Greeks now take over. And the greatest Greek king is King Alexander the Great. Now look what happens. As soon as he has arisen, his kingdom shall be broken and divided toward the four winds of heaven. Do you know how many main generals, Alexander the Great had? 4. When Alexander the Great died, guess what happened to the kingdom of Greece? It broke up into 4 different kingdoms. Okay? I've got these for you if you want me to listen to you. I may not pronounce them all properly. But after Alexander the Great's death, 4 generals who led under Alexander the Great, now you get 4 different breakups of Greece. Macedonia is one. Thrace, 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 probably Thrace. The Seleucid and the Ptolemaic. Okay, those are the 4 kingdoms that Greece gets broken up into. Okay, so far in chapter 11, this mighty angelic being reveals to Daniel, after Cyrus, 4 kings. The last one's going to be mightier and greater than the other, but that king will attack Greece and eventually lose, and Greece will become the dominant power. Under Alexander the Great, they will rule the world, but then after he dies, the Greece kingdom is going to be broken up into the 4 winds of heaven. 4 different nations kingdoms will come under Greece. And then, in verses 5 through 12, there is a conflict between the 2 last kingdoms. So what the angelic being does is he focuses in on the 2 last kingdoms, which are the Seleucid kingdom and the Ptolemaic kingdom. The reason why those 2 become the focus is because they are the 2 kingdoms that will directly affect Israel. The other 2 kingdoms are more north, and so those 2 kingdoms don't directly affect Israel. So what's happening is, I want you to see what's happening. It's a narrowing in, right? So we're like Persia, and we've got 4 kings and Xerxes, and then Greece comes, and Greece gets broken up into 4, and then we're just going to look at 2 of those 4, and because those 2 are the 2 that are going to directly affect Israel. And here's what happens. The conflict between the northern and southern kingdom that's mentioned in verses 5 through 12 is about the Seleucid and the Ptolemaic kingdom. Those 2 kingdoms begin to fight and wage war with one another, and eventually, in verses 13 through 20, eventually we see the Seleucid supremacy. The Seleucid kingdom eventually becomes supreme over the Ptolemaic. You know what I'm talking about. They become supreme. Okay, we're still narrowing now. Now we're going to focus on just the Seleucid kingdom. By the way, all 4 of those names are the names of the generals. Macedon was a general. Thrace was a general. These were all they were the generals. That's where the names came from. Now we're just looking at the Seleucid kingdom, the Seleucid supremacy that takes place. And there are king after king after king after king of the Seleucid kingdom. Eventually, though, we get to verses 21, and look at verse 21. In his place, so the last king of verse 20, in 21, in his place shall rise a contemptible person, to whom royal majesty has not been given. He shall come in without warning and obtain the kingdom by flatteries. By the way, Antiochus Epiphanes, who we have talked about multiple times, he basically stole the kingdom. He basically came in, swooped in, and stole the kingdom. The Seleucid kingdom became his. Antiochus Epiphanes becomes king over the Seleucid kingdom. He believed himself to be divine. The term Epiphanes, all right? Maybe you've ever heard of the word epiphany? Like someone has an epiphany, all right? It starts back with Epiphanies, and what it basically means God manifests. Okay? So when someone says I've had an epiphany, it's like God manifested this thing to me. Okay? But to call yourself Antiochus Epiphanes, he was declaring himself to be God manifested. He believed himself to be divine. He was not so much interested in the gods of his people as he was he himself being worshipped as a god. This desire to be worshipped, this desire to rule, this desire for people to see him as Epiphanes caused him to attack other nations that did not worship him. One of those nations would have been who? Israel. Israel wasn't worshiping Antiochus Epiphanes. They were worshiping Yahweh. They had started building their city again, and they built walls around it, and they built the temple, and they were sacrificing and worshiping and doing their stuff in Israel, worshiping Yahweh. And Antiochus Epiphanes comes into Israel, comes to Jerusalem, goes into the Holy of Holies, sacrifices a pig on the altar in the Holy of Holies. You know anything about Jewish people, pigs are considered filthy, dirty animals that are not supposed to be eaten. Okay? Aesthetic Jews cannot eat, Hasidic Jews cannot eat pork. They cannot eat bacon. Cannot have ham. Nothing that comes from scavenging dirty animals. Well, Antiochus Epiphanes goes into the Holy of Holies, and he takes a pig and he slaughters the pig on the Holy of Holies, on the altar. And he sets up worship to himself in the Holy of Holies. The Bible calls this the abomination of desolation. You can see this in verse 31. Forces from him shall appear and profane the temple and fortress, and shall take away the regular burnt offering. He made Israel, listen, he made Israel stop sacrificing. He ended offerings. And they shall set up the abomination that makes desolate. That is what Antiochus Epiphanes does as he walks into the temple. He eventually is going to be run back by the Maccabees. The Maccabees are going to revolt against him and run him back. His rule is going to continue in verses 40 through 49. In verses 40 through 49, his rule continues. 40 through 44, his rule continues. Verse 45, his rule ends. And he shall pitch his palatial tents between the sea and the glorious holy mountain, yet he shall come to his end with none to help him. Now, here's the history, real quick. After Cyrus is going to come 4 Persian kings. The last Persian king is Xerxes. He is the most powerful. He has built up might with his wealth. They estimate that he may have had a 100,000 to 200,000 man army. Okay? He decides he wants to go after the Greeks. Big mistake. All the Greeks did was get ready to fight. right? They push him back. They defeat him. Xerxes fall. Greece comes to power. When Greece comes to power, Alexander the Great is the greatest Greek king. He leads them to world domination. Eventually he falls and the kingdom is broken up and given to his 4 generals. Okay? The 2 generals that mostly affect Israel are then talked about with the Seleucid kingdom being the supreme kingdom. Antiochus Epiphanes is a king of the Seleucid kingdom. He attacks Israel. He profanes the Holy of Holies, abomination of desolation, but he too will meet his end. Now here's the question I want to ask and answer. Why does God reveal this prophetic history to Daniel? Why does God do this? Because here's the thing. Everything God just said is going to happen, correct? It's going to happen. Antiochus Epiphanes is going to go into the temple and slaughter a pig, and the abomination of desolation is going to happen. Israel's not going to stop that. They're not going to prevent that. Alexander the Great is going to rule the world. Like, there's nothing they could do to change this history. This is God saying to Daniel, Daniel, this is what I'm going to do. So the question is, why does God give them this history, right? Which is their future. It's our history looking back, but it's their future. That's why I'm calling it prophetic history. Why does God tell them how all this is going to go down? Here's what I believe to be the answer. God wanted Israel to remain focused and faithful and to persevere through all the wars and the rumors of wars that were going to come upon them. Israel, you are going to hear about war after war after war after war, and king after king after king. It is going to happen over and over and over again. And through all of this, you've got to be focused and faithful and persevere and be about the one kingdom that really matters. Jesus in Matthew chapter 24. Verse 6, Jesus says these words. Listen, this is Jesus talking about the temple being destroyed. Remember this? We talked about the temple being destroyed in the 70 weeks. Here's what Jesus says. He says, listen, the temple's going to be destroyed, but listen to these words. And you will hear of wars and rumors of wars. See that you are not alarmed, for this must take place. What does Jesus mean by that? He's basically saying, listen, this is the nature of human history. The nature of human beings is that they fight wars. We see it going on right now. Right? North Korea has a psycho leading their country. We're trying to talk him off the ledge from getting a nuclear weapon. Russia, they are psycho. Right? America can be very, very psycho. Listen to me. Because this is the way that human history goes. They fight wars. They try to gather power. And this is the way it's always going to be. There is always going to be wars and rumors of wars. Look at me. Always. Your entire life, there will not be peace. There will not be peace. There's going to be constant, because this is the nature of human beings. So if this is the way it's going to be, God's telling Daniel and Israel, this is the way it's going to be in your lifetime. What are you supposed to do while that's happening? What are you supposed to do when nations are raging? What are you supposed to do when nations are simply worried about themselves? I love what the psalmist says. Some trust in chariots. Some trust in horses. We trust in the name of the Lord our God. Do you know why this history is given? This history is given so that in the midst of all of human history, as they're doing all their crazy, stupid stuff, here's what we do. Look at me. Here's what we do. We focus. focus on the kingdom that matters. We persevere. We keep going. Do you remember way back in chapter 2? Way back in chapter 2, King Nebuchadnezzar had a vision of 4 kingdoms. But then there was a 5th kingdom that came along. And listen to how this 5th kingdom is described in Daniel chapter 2, verses 44 and 45. Listen to this. And in the days of those kings, okay, listen, that can be any kings. In the days of Donald Trump and Kim Jong-un and Vladimir Putin and Al-Qaeda and ISIS, whatever, any of the kings, any of the rulers of the world, listen to this. Those kings, the God of heaven will set up a kingdom that will never be destroyed. You know the Babylonians thought they were going to rule the world forever? Just a side note now. You know the Greeks thought they were going to rule the world forever? Just a side note now. Then the Romans come along. Guess what? They thought they were going to rule the world forever. Just a side note now. You can go see all the ruins if you would like to. And you know what? If God tarries long enough, the United States of America will come to an end. It will. I don't know how long it'll be.
Look at it now. Look at
I mean,
Detroit. Look at Michigan.
Yeah, Detroit's bankrupt, and they don't even. You got cities that don't even have water that people can drink in Flint. Like there will come a time, because this is what human kingdoms do. They end. All of them. No matter how great they are, they end. So guess what, Christians? What has got to be our priority? Kingdom of God. The kingdom of God that will never fail, that will never be destroyed. It doesn't matter what happens to any other kingdoms. What are we going to be about? We're going to be about the kingdom of God. That's what we're going to be about. We're going to be focused on the kingdom of God. We're going to do what we're supposed to do. Because there's a kingdom that cannot be destroyed. It shall break in pieces all of these kingdoms and bring them to an end, and it shall stand forever. Why in the world are we going to focus on a kingdom that will end when we are a part of a kingdom that will never end? And that's what we're called to do. So why all this prophetic history? Why all this stuff given to Daniel? It's to show him, Daniel, listen. The whole book is about one thing. Every kingdom rises and falls. But God's kingdom lasts forever. What kingdom will you be about? What kingdom will you spend your days living for? Because there's only one kingdom that's going to